Hello. This is my home office, some old wood paneling, things like that. Um, we're going to continue on chapter 7, and let's see if I can do this right. Share my screen. Share my desktop over here. I'll get this out of the way. Out of the way. Here we go. So demographic factors. A lot of things besides family. We talked about social class, gender, age, ethnicity, religion, and so on that can affect public opinion. We have the gender gap. The gender gap is a difference in political views between men and women. And we'll look more at that in chapters 9 and 10. Women are more likely than men to identify as Democrats and to vote for Democrat candidates in general. Lots of things have to be taken in general. And that's the way that works. So the gender gap in public opinion, let's make this bigger here by doing my little trick, taking it off the page. And make it there we are, full screen. So women are the green, the men are the orange. And peace is best achieved through diplomacy. A little over 60% of the men and a little above maybe 54% of the women think that peace is best achieved through diplomacy. So other options for peace would be combat, I suppose. Somehow men being more in favor of diplomacy. Helping the poor is a top priority. Men have it at, or women, I'm sorry, I switched that around. Women have it at 58% and men at about 46%. That helping the poor is a top priority. Preferring big government, women tend to prefer big government at about 58% in this poll. And men are about 36% prefer bigger government. Government is not doing enough to help old people. That'd be 65% for women and about 54% maybe for women or for men. Abortion should be legal. The women say close at 60%, and the men say 62% that abortion should be legal. All right, let's knock that out of the way. Race and ethnicity. The most striking political difference between African Americans and white is that African Americans are overwhelmingly Democrat, and have been so since the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. And strange comments from our current president at one point during his campaign where he said, if you're not voting Democrat, you're not Black, which was like super offensive to all the people who are diehard Black Democrats. African Americans and whites hold many similar political attitudes. All right, they have similar attitudes about same-sex marriage. They will support same-sex marriage. They tend to support marijuana legalization at similar rates. There's some sharp differences, though, in other public policy questions. All right, let's take a look at this one. Do my little pull it off the page trick. Up there. Make it full screen. African Americans Okay, so whites are green, orange is African Americans. African Americans are treated less fairly by the criminal system. We've got like 86-87% of blacks would agree with that, and 62%, maybe 61% of whites agree that African Americans are treated less fairly by the criminal justice system. Police use the right amount of force. Whites, it's about 74%, and blacks, it's about 35%. Now, I'm pretty sure this is measuring that they use enough force, not too little force. You could interpret that statement that maybe they need to use more force or they need to use less force. Like in our current, all recent years history, we're going to have to interpret that as meaning they could use this much or they could use less force. Police officers are held accountable when misconduct occurs. See, there we got error in the writing here. Police officers are held accountable when misconduct occurs. We've got 70% of the white people and 32%, maybe 31% of black people. I'm agreeing with that. Support reparations for descendants of slaves. Not popular with white people, 15%. And then with black people, it's at like 73%, maybe on this chart. What does that mean? So we give them money. Do they never get to talk about it again? I don't know. I don't know what their intention is there. But if they get reparations, does that mean it's done and we don't ever have to hear about that again? That's kind of the way it works. Forgiveness and or confession and penance basically means it's gone away. People support the death penalty of persons convicted of murder. The white people are out here at about 59%, and 36% of black people support the idea that death penalty for persons convicted of murder. If we were in class together, we'd talk about that. We talk about why would you not want death penalty, and why would you want death penalty? So let's talk about that for a second. Supporters of the death penalty are saying that a person needs to be punished, and the ultimate punishment for murder is your own death. And I would say that there's plenty of people out there that an eye for an eye is the way they think of things. Other people, if are going to look at it and say, well, an awful lot of people have been pulled off death row, have been proved innocent after bad trials and things like that. Bad evidence was used, and lots of people have been pulled off death row and released because it turned out that the later evidence, especially genetic evidence, proved that they weren't the murderer. So are we putting people to death right and left that are innocent? We got plenty of people who have been taken out of prison because later evidence proves that they were innocent. Our jury system is not perfect. So we have those two opposing views. Too many people would die that were innocent, and others say, well, we have to punish those who really are murderers though. Okay. Last question here. This one: believe too much attention is paid to race. 50% of the whites and about 12% of blacks. I've been seeing ads and things where black people are talking about, why are we spending so much time talking about race? Why aren't we getting past this? Why aren't we moving to the next thing? Instead of always talking about race. We're going to talk about race in this class because it's still an issue. If it wasn't still an issue, we wouldn't be talking about race so much. But until other people think that it's not an issue anymore, we will keep doing so. And maybe your generation can move past that. All right. that. Yeah. After the death of George Floyd, record numbers of citizens protested police brutality across the country. And here's pictures of some Black Lives Matters protesters. The neighborhood that got destroyed in Minneapolis was a Native American neighborhood. I took my wife through there about 2 weeks after the event, saw all the devastation and the destroyed businesses and things like that. And basically, a whole lot of people who weren't from that area came into the precinct, destroyed their businesses, destroyed people's places of employment, things like that. It seriously hurt the Native American community in that part of Minneapolis. They did serious harm that will probably last for a long time in that community. And there certainly will make racial relations between the Native Americans and Blacks in Minneapolis much worse by these people coming in. And many of them came from they weren't even from Minneapolis. Some of them came from out of state to cause all this trouble. And it was really sad because they weren't destroying white businesses. They were destroying businesses owned by Native American people from the local community. And they tried to destroy the local Target store, which employed all these people. And so they had no place to go to work for a while, and they weren't getting paid. And they seriously hurt the community. And there's a lot of hard feelings about that why does your protest have to hurt us? Because they weren't just hurting white people. They seriously mostly hurt Native American people in that community. And our country isn't just Blacks and whites. We're talking about the Latinos here. The term Latinx is being used a lot. It's not grammatically correct in Spanish, but we're in America, so we can mess with it all we want, I guess. Instead of saying Latinos and Latinas, they say Latinx, means covering all of the Hispanic people of different varieties. But Latinos come from many different places. They have different cultures of origin, you might say. People from Central and South America, people from Colombia and Guatemala have very different cultures that they've come from. And they're not that far apart. And some of them are heavy into not speaking Spanish and being very American. And others are very strongly hold on to the particular Hispanic culture that they came from, that their ancestors came from. Kind of like you hear me talk about Norway all the time. It's just what I do. It's part of my culture. This one's not going to let me expand. Let's see what I can do here. What can I do here to make that bigger? That isn't going to do it. No, I'm going to grab it and drop it. Let's see what it looks like. Instead of opening the other part, this might be the fastest way to do this. Grab and drop it. All right. So all Americans versus Latinos. So all Americans is all the Asians and Blacks and whites and people in general. And this number probably includes the Latinos. I don't know if they'd be separated out from all Americans. Is green, and orange is the Latinos. Undocumented immigrants are a drain on society. About 36% of all Americans, and about 22% of Latinos. A lot of Latino people I've always, they're from here. They came here legally. In fact, probably the majority of them, their families came here before the time when we had immigration laws that would prevent them from coming. Support a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. Latinos have 65%, and all other Americans is 55%. So looking at this, the majority of people say that there should be a path for citizenship for undocumented immigrants. Um, Basically, if you're not committing other violations of the law, and you've been here for a while, maybe that could be a possibility. What do you think? We would talk about that in class if we were face to face. Support decreasing the number of legal immigrants admitted to the U.S. 34% of all Americans agree that they should decrease the number of illegal immigrants, and then 25% here for Latinos. And when this recent year, there's been no legal immigration. No one is allowed to come and get a visa to come here. Very, very few. That's part of why it was such a slow process to get people from Afghanistan to get permission to come here, because we just haven't been doing that. It's very difficult to get permission to come to the United States. Basically, you can come here if your job transfers from within a company and they're completely supporting you 100%. That's the primary way to get to the United States right now. So already have a job with an American company and get transferred here. One of our big questions in the class: abortion should be illegal in all circumstances. 15%, maybe 14% of all Americans agree with that, and about 12% maybe of the Latinos. And this line can be very strongly drawn on religious grounds. Religious people defining when life begins at conception, and the other side basically not concerned that much about when life begins. That's really, they tend to talk past each other like so many issues. One side will have an issue and they'll be talking, and the other one has an issue and they're going right past each other. They're not talking about the same thing at all. Their points don't match up. We're not saying, one side is not saying this, and this. The other side's not countering that. They're saying something completely different. That's kind of the oddity about the whole thing, is they're not talking about the same things at all. The last one on here is support building a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. About 44% of all Americans agree with that, which means the vast majority says don't spend money doing that. And about 22% of the Latinos agree that we should build a wall between the U.S. and Mexico. Latinos tend to be very in favor of legal immigration. They want people to come here the right way and not be any kind of burden on society. Okay. That. Oh, and here's one of those nice things. This is not Marco Rubio. That is not Marco Rubio at all. Anybody know who that is? I'm guessing that you got the answer right. Religion. Americans are religious people. We kind of founded our country on that freedom of religion, the ability to do whatever we need to do for our own religious beliefs. 50 years ago, discussions of religion and politics focused more on differences between denominations, which at that time largely meant Protestants, Catholics, and Jews. I told a story about how my mother was outcast from her family because she married someone who was a Lutheran, Norwegian Lutheran, and she was a German Protestant just before World War II started in Western Minnesota. So even within, one Protestant group versus another Protestant group, there really isn't that a whole lot of difference between Presbyterians and and the Lutherans. There's just a very, very few minor things. But it was a big deal for them. Such divisions remain useful. In general, Jewish Americans as well as African American Protestants tend to remain on the left. And evangelical Protestants are more likely on the right. Catholic and mainline Protestants fall more in the middle of the ideological spectrum. As someone from the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, we kind of, my church runs the full spectrum of political beliefs, and some broad ideas about social issues relating to religion. And that has more to do with tradition than anything modern thought. We've had Lutheran groups that were very liberal from their start in America, and others that were very conservative from their start in America. So if they've been here 200 years, 150 years, whatever, however long they've been here as Lutherans in America, the churches still follow whatever their original liberal versus conservative theology was when they got here. Let's see. And we've kind of more of a divide here now. The more religious someone is, the more likely they're out to be conservative these days. Conservative on issues of sex in the family, such as abortion and same-sex marriage. 39% among Christians who attend worship weekly, and hence are more religious, 39% support banning abortion in all circumstances. But those who seldom or never attend worship, the figure is only 11%. Okay. So of Christians who attend worship weekly, 39% support banning abortion, which means 61% are either in the middle or against banning abortions. And you can be in the middle on this thing. You can see positives and negatives and arguments on both sides of this issue. You can be in the middle because they're, like I said, they're not talking about the same thing. When you look at everything they're talking about, the two sides, you can say, well, I agree with some of both, and that's okay. Just looking for the next thing I want to talk about here. On the death penalty and the support of environmental spending, those who are more religious are more liberal. Okay. A religious someone has no effect on their attitudes towards immigration. Controlling for other demographics. On the death penalty and support of environmental spending, those who are more religious are more liberal. So more religious has this strange effect on what people do. So here's some dynamics. Immigration reform, client or majoritarian politics. So there's been a lot of talk about immigration reform for quite a while. During the 2016 election, Clinton and Trump took sharply different positions on this issue. Once in office, President Trump shut down the government and then declared a national emergency to get funding for his well along the border with Mexico. So we'd be talking about this wall right now. It's got all kinds of ways it's being funded. It's got private funding and things like that. Let's see. So it's a complex issue. Some people want tougher immigration law enforcement and more focus on border security. And others want a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. And the two are not exclusive. You can say, we want to have fewer people getting across the border. But once they're here, if they're behaving themselves, the only crime that they've committed only one crime, and that's crossing the border illegally. And so some people want to forgive them for that crime. And if they're behaving themselves while they're here. Other people say, well, when we find them, we got to send them back, no matter what their circumstances are. And that's kind of harsh, because people come here for the same reasons they did when my ancestors came here, because this is the place where opportunity is. Immigrants tend to take lower paying jobs that the rest of us don't want to do. And that's true. They also tend to be more likely to be entrepreneurs, take risks. They came here for opportunity. And opportunity doesn't mean getting a job working for someone else. Opportunity means taking risks and doing something. It's not risky for me to take a job teaching at Butler Community College. It would be risky for me to set up an online training program to teach political science on Facebook and try to make a living doing that. That would be risky. And doing the whole YouTube thing and trying to figure out how to make a living doing training videos and things about American politics. That would be risky. But a new immigrant might set up something that says, hey, this is how government works, and this is what we need to understand as people coming here. They might take that risk. They might do that. Okay. The American public at large pays for undocumented immigrants through providing them with education and emergency medical services. And that's guaranteed by the Supreme Court decisions. It says we have to provide education for them, and we have to take care of them if they walk in the emergency room. Supporters for a path to citizenship present it as majoritarian politics. Everyone, including the undocumented immigrant, pays for this opportunity through hard work and taxes. So the path to citizenship people in our little chart here say that it's distributed costs, everybody pays for it, everybody benefits. If an issue is perceived as, if this was client politics, then the group that benefits needs to be viewed as deserving of those benefits in order for legislation to pass. Okay, let's highlight that line. That would make it client politics. So everybody pays for it. Only certain people benefit from it. They have to be deemed worthy of this special service that everybody else is going to pay for. Of course, they pay for it too as part of their taxes. Okay. So I guess it'll be up to you to decide what you thought. Do you think it's majoritarian politics? Do you think that everybody pays for this? Their education and medical care when they first get here? Do you think that's concentrated benefits, or do you think that's distributed benefits? That does everybody eventually benefit from this, or is it just going to stay benefiting for them? Is it majoritarian politics or is it client politics? How are we doing? Class and income. Class is an interesting concept. It's hard to define it. Can you define it by income? Can you by occupation, wealth, schooling, prestige, personality? I think it's some combination of those things. When we talk about class, it's easy to see people in a particular economic class by their income, by their occupations, where they live. If you are a fairly wealthy family and you live in a fairly wealthy community, and you tend to have jobs in a very wealthy income sources, and that's how your family runs, you might be upper class, regardless of your race or ethnicity. So you could have a Black family that's very high class family through economics and occupation and schooling and that kind of thing. and they're going to think differently than a different class of people. They've been trained to think differently. They have different world experiences, that sort of thing. And class is a very divisive thing. Our textbook talks about working class and upper class or white collar workers. There can be a huge difference between these people. There can be people who have never picked up a shovel in their life that they wouldn't even do their own gardening. If they went on to put some flowers in or something, they would hire someone to do that. They would never do that themselves. And working class people are much more likely to say, "Hey," or if you've come from some kind of working class background and you become upper class or white collar, you're going to still do some of the things that you did when you were young that saw your parents doing. Some of that parent background contributing here. All right. If you look at a country like India, where they have a caste system, where for centuries they've had a formalized class system, you were automatically going to have this kind of opportunities, this kind of treatment in the world based on who your parents were and the color of your skin. And the lower your class is, chances are the darker your skin is in India. And the highest class people tend to be very light skinned. And they're trying to get rid of the caste system. They've made it basically illegal to get government jobs based on caste system these days. But if you see a successful person from India here in the United States, there's a very high chance that they have a darker skin because they didn't have opportunity in India. Their parents or their grandparents didn't have opportunity in India, and they came here, and they were treated equally here as far as economic education access and that kind of thing. So when I see a doctor whose from background is from Pakistan or India or someplace like that, they have been darker skinned people. They just wouldn't have had opportunity back in India. They would have put them in a particular class based on who they were born to. The limits of demographics. You can't just look at things like wages. Plumbers and professors may have similar incomes, and I can tell you right now, only a really bad plumber would get paid what I get paid. That'd be a plumber that works 10 hours a week or something. I don't know, because I make a whole lot less than a plumber. My cousin owns a plumbing business in Minnesota, and he has everything you would ever want in the world financially. He took the risk and started a business, but did it as a trade business, so blue collar business, and that made all the difference for that. Political partisanship and ideology. Partisanship is an individual's identification with a party, whether they consider themselves Democrats or Republicans or an independent or a Green Party or Libertarian Party or the Marijuana Party or whatever party that might be. It's also called partisan identity. So partisans are people who have picked sides. Okay. And we'll talk more of that in chapter 9 in a couple of weeks. But simply, partisanship has a powerful, even fundamental influence on citizens' attitudes. Often after issues like taxes, spending on social programs, gun control, and many others, Democrats and Republicans have different opinions. Identifying with the party powerfully shapes an individual's beliefs. So once you decide that you're a Democrat, you kind of take on a whole lot of stuff. Say, well, my other Democrats believe this, so I at least a little bit believe that. Or all of my fellow Republicans believe this, so I kind of believe that. Or all my Libertarian counterparts believe this, or I kind of believe that, so I'm going to kind of believe that. All my Green Party people believe this, so I'm going to kind of believe that too. It just kind of think how it happens is when you decide you're kind of leaning towards one group, you start to take on more of their attributes. All right. It's not just blind obedience, rather it reflects the fact that people identify with the party because it shares their values. As a result, they will follow the lead of their party's officials. So one of the things that we're doing in this class is you're figuring out what your values are by answering all these little question things every week. You're figuring out what your values are and what that looks like. You may have walked into this class thinking, I don't know what I am, or gee, we've always been Democrats, we've always been Republicans in my house, so maybe maybe I think some of that same way too, or no, I'm kind of leaning a different direction and I want to go this other way. That's part of what we're doing in this class, is helping you figure out what you want and what you believe. Okay. So the attitudes of ordinary Democrats and Republicans reflect the opinions of elite Democrats and Republicans. So the leaders tend to tell people, well, this is how we as a party believe about things. And then people kind of fall in line with whatever that is. The last 50 years in my lifetime, especially in the House of Representatives, the divide between Democrats and Republicans has become stronger and stronger on certain issues. Okay. Let's see. Party sorting. The alignment of partisanship and issues and positions so that the Democrats tend to take more liberal positions and the Republicans tend to take more conservative ones. Remember, I mentioned yesterday or on Tuesday that there are liberal leaning Republicans in Congress, and there are conservative leaning Democrats in Congress. And that becomes a problem for the leadership. This guy off and make it big. So we have issues. Consistently liberal, consistently conservative. The median Republican is slightly off center from being consistently conservative. And the median Democrat is slightly off center from being consistently liberal. And some Democrats are more conservative than the party in general. And some Republicans are more conservative or more liberal than the party in general. That's in 1994, 2004. This was a little closer. Or the conservatives tended to be a little more towards the middle of things. And 2017, me up here again. The Democrats, and so this is 13-year time period, the Democrats and the Republican medians have become much farther apart. Okay, the Democrats are much farther to the left than the Republicans are to the right. If we could overlap these, you would see that this line runs right about here, and this line runs way over here. So the Democrats have become more liberal than they used to be by a lot, and the Republicans have become a little bit more conservative, but not much more. Not comparing the two, it's pretty different. So these lines were pretty much in the middle. This lines have actually shifted to the left a bit. So if the middle of the whole thing was right here, the Democrat median would be the middle. Here, the Republican line in 2004 would be pretty close to the middle of the range. In the middle of the range here would be right about there. And very few people are in that medium range anymore. But we do have some in Congress that are in this space, and it drives the leadership nuts because they can't get them to just do whatever they want them to. All right. Kind of watching my clock here, see how long we've had class. I don't want to get over the hour time frame here. Effective polarization is tendency of partisans to dislike or distrust those from other people, the other party. So affective meaning your feelings, polarized feelings. People say, oh, those people over there are just mean and hateful. And both sides say that about each other. Both sides think the other side is just mean and hateful people. And it's not really true about either side. But some of them can be very narrow-minded, I guess, what you would say, on both sides of those issues. And Green Party and Libertarian people can be very narrow-minded also. It's just the kind of the way people are. Political ideology. Political ideology, a more or less consistent set of beliefs about what policies the government ought to pursue. Political scientists measure the extent to which people have a political ideology in two ways. The first is by determining how frequently people use broad political categories, like how often do they say words like liberal, conservative, radical, to describe their own views. Okay. So I'm going to highlight that. The second involves a simple mathematical procedure measuring how accurately one can predict people's views on a subject at a one time based on their view on that subject at an earlier time. So how much did your opinion change? Measuring how accurately one can predict people's views at the time based on their view. That's a complicated sentence. It basically says they're going to measure how your opinion changed over time. Okay, and you can read all that. So we have here a table. It's pretty long. You can look at that. So when they get down to it, 97% of core conservatives are Republicans, and 99% of solid liberals are Democrats. Give me my chance to highlight that. Select it. There we go. So if your core beliefs are conservative, you'll likely be lean with the Republicans. If your core beliefs are liberal, you're likely to go with the Democrats. You got to remember that there's a good third of all American people who actually vote don't categorize themselves as Republicans or Democrats, but rather vote for the person they think is the best candidate, or for the person they think is the best looking, or whatever reason they have. We don't necessarily go with one political party versus another. But most Americans are not so ideologically consistent. Okay? It's not unusual for someone who votes a lot for Republicans to occasionally vote for a Democrat, and same way the other way around, for someone who usually votes Democrat to occasionally vote for a Republican. You don't have to identify with a party. And about 8% of Americans are bystanders, largely removed from the political process. They don't have anything to do with anything. They just don't care. And that's just one of the things that, people are that way. A lot of issues that it just doesn't matter to them. looking deeper into the analysis, you will see that there's a three-way self-identification, that the old three-way self-identification of surveys possibly obscured more what they revealed regarding the average person's political views. So to say that you had to fit in one of these categories is not necessarily true. Elites are persons with a disproportionate view of political power, which is an important share of political power. That's people who are activists, people who hold office, people who run for office, work on campaigns or on newspapers, lead interest groups and social movements, and speak out on public issues. I suppose in some way that would have been me at one point in my life. In 1992, I ran for state representative in Minnesota, and I've been a political party officer. I've actually been up to the state level in 2 different political parties, which makes it a little bit harder for you to figure out what party I might support at this point. Because I'm just telling you that I've been a little bit up in the ranks of 2 different political parties. I remember when I started class today. I have something here that tells me how long we've been meeting. Let's stop this share. Can you see how long class has been going? I can't. Well, that's weird. We have a whole other section to look at. Look at information and public opinion. All right, so heuristics is information shortcuts used by voters to make a decision. We're going to end class here pretty quick. So public opinion and public policy. So do you support the comprehensive immigration reform bill? Things to consider. Okay, you can look at that. It's in your Mind Tap. And that is the end of our chapter. Pretty close. Pretty sure I'm at the end of the hour. I will see you on Monday. I do not have any appointments next week at all. And we'll see you then. Have a great weekend. Do your chapter 7 homework.